Greetings, the difficulty level of this video is moderate. I get a lot of questions about velocity of money, what velocity of money is, and why velocity of money might have some impact on inflation or economic growth. And therefore, we're going to discuss that subject over here today. So this website I've pulled up is from the Federal Reserve Board of Research, and it is the velocity of money chart for the United States going back to 1960. So first, what is the definition of velocity of money? The velocity of money is the speed at which the same amount of money is being transacted through the economy. For example, if you have a bunch of cash in a savings account and are not withdrawing from it, then there is no velocity of money associated with that, aside from whatever negligible interest that is collected on that account. But if you go to an auto dealership and you buy a car and pay cash, and the dealer makes some money, and then the dealer goes to a restaurant and has a fancy dinner, and then the waiter who served him got a big tip, and then the waiter goes and spends that tip on something, then the same money was transacted 3 or 4 times in a short period, and that was a very substantial contribution to velocity of money. On average, poor people are bigger contributors to velocity of money than rich people, not per capita, of course, but relative to the amount of money that comes into their pocket. This is because poor people don't really have any savings in many cases, and whatever money they get, they either have to spend immediately or choose to spend it immediately. We've all seen statistics of how something like 60% of U.S. households do not have $2,000 of liquid cash in case of an emergency. If that is true in the United States, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, then that is even more true the world over, and is a sobering statistic about the impoverished state of the human condition today, despite all the economic progress that has occurred. But back to this chart. This is the velocity of M2 money since 1960. What is M2? M2 is a superset of M1. M1 is the sum total of the most liquid types of cash, such as checking accounts. M2 is all of M1 and some slightly less liquid types of assets that could easily be converted into M1, such as money market mutual funds and things like that. And M2 is a more comprehensive metric because M2 can be drawn upon in a matter of days in most cases. And the Federal Reserve has stopped tracking certain statistics related to M1 because it's too volatile. And M2 is more stable and accounts for a greater percentage of wealth in society and is perhaps less distorted by the Federal Reserve money printing that is occurring these days. So since 1960, the velocity of money was relatively stable, and then it surged from 1985 until 2000. And a lot of this was attributed to baby boomers reaching their peak earning and spending years and buying houses and having families and things like that. And then it started to dip. And after 2010, it has started to plunge lower and lower and lower, despite this being the age of quantitative easing. Now, money printing, quantitative easing, is a worldwide statistic, and the United States is not even the primary contributor to it. The United States only does about 1/4 of world monetary creation, quantitative easing, as we'll see in some other charts. But then, because of this coronavirus crisis, the velocity of money plunged very substantially and has stayed there. And instead of the chart going back to 1960, we can have a 5-year chart to look at this some more. So before coronavirus, it was already decreasing a little bit, but then it plunged and it has stayed there ever since through Q1 of 2021. This plunge is down to 1.1 on this scale. If there is a complete reopening and most people are vaccinated from coronavirus, will the velocity of money rise back to what it was beforehand, 1.4, 1.5? And will that cause inflation? So the answer is, I don't think it will rise all the way back to that anytime soon. It will take quite a bit of time to rise back to that. It will be a gradual adjustment because some people have adapted to a different lifestyle in certain ways. And while they'll have some freedom to go back to certain old practices, it will still take quite a bit of time. Secondly, this isn't a very large increase either. As we saw from the long-term chart, it would still be back to a pretty low level, not back to what it was even in 2007, for example. Therefore, the spring back will not be as fast as the fall, and therefore will not be a contributor to some hypothetical inflationary event that a lot of people are predicting but never seems to arrive. There'll be some brief blips of inflation because velocity of money increasing causes those poorer people that I mentioned to start spending a bit more, which they were unable to do during this entire coronavirus crisis for about 14 months now. But that is a very temporary type of thing. Also, any brief blips of inflation attract technological progress to consume that inflation. As my atom thesis articulates, any increases in inflation are actually fuel for more technological progress, and technology comes in to attack what is causing that inflation and leads to production of more technology, which then can consume an ever-rising amount of inflation. Therefore, exponential quantitative easing does not cause inflation in the long run, as long as it is not above the trendline band, which we talk about in other videos. So this supposedly imminent increase in velocity of money as a cause for high inflation or hyperinflation even is greatly exaggerated. There'll be a small blip, and that is about it, because it's still only going to go back to 1.4. Quantitative easing, as currently done, is very concentrated, and that's part of the problem of it. It does not percolate down to average people. It only boosts the prices of stocks and a few other assets that are disproportionately owned by the ultra-wealthy. All market forces are trending in a direction that central banks of the world will have to send quantitative easing cash directly to people in equal amounts, a form of universal income, but much better than other UBI proposals that are floating out there, which are very low-tech and very socialist, whereas this one is not socialist at all. It can be coupled with a reduction or even eventual sunsetting of income tax on humans once quantitative easing is large enough and the cash is being transmitted directly to people. And therefore, we are going to look at the chart of quantitative easing worldwide again. Remember, this is US only velocity of money. There is no data about worldwide velocity of money. Nobody makes charts like that, but one should, because all quantitative easing is of a worldwide nature. It is completely borderless. Even if the United States stopped all money printing, that would only reduce world money printing by 25%. And if some other country increased their money printing, then the total might very well remain the same, even if the US stopped. So we go to this other chart. This is the central bank monthly balance sheets that I often do videos for. So these are the four major central banks of the world: the United States Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, and People's Bank of China. And you can see the red line, US Federal Reserve, is not even the biggest contributor at all. So whether the United States Federal Reserve prints a lot of money or does not, it's only a small portion of the world's money printing. And then the chart right below this shows the cumulative money printing since 2007. And as we can see, it's following a steady exponential curve, but it's also moderating somewhat. Therefore, this velocity of money decrease, which prompted an extraordinary amount of money printing, the fear is that this amount of quantitative easing combined with an increase in velocity of money will cause hyperinflation, and I say it absolutely won't, because the greatest amount of money printing is already behind us, as we can see from this chart below. The peak year-over-year growth was 46%, and now it's already down to just 25.7%, and my atom thesis says that the ideal band is between 16 to 24%, which it's almost converging back down to. 16 to 24% annual year-over-year growth is needed just to offset technological deflation worldwide. Again, these are all worldwide numbers. U.S. velocity of money is only a fraction of that equation. What is the velocity of money in Europe, in Japan? Those are all factors in any inflation calculation, and the velocity of money there is also relatively low. In fact, Japan has had super low velocity of money for a very long time. Therefore, peak year-over-year growth in quantitative easing is already behind us. And like I said, just to stay in this band, the 2020s as a decade will have to have $100 trillion of new quantitative easing. The 2010s had $23 trillion. The 2020s, meaning the point from January 1st, 2020 until December 31st, 2029, will need to have $100 trillion just to keep up. And the fact that $11 trillion has already been done in just the first 16 months of this 10-year period means that that prediction is very much on track. There will be no hyperinflation. But going back to the velocity of money chart, so there we have it. It should rise back to 1.4. It will probably not go above 1.4 unless they do a major structural change in the way quantitative easing is done, as per my recommendations in the Atom publication, which are nowhere close to being adopted, of course. That will only cause very temporary blips in inflation, which will immediately be attacked by technology, because the broader technonomic medium, the world technological force that whacks down anything that is too expensive or too out of date, is so much more powerful than it was before. In 2021, it is very powerful, for sure. And any such blips in inflation are, in fact, the fuel of new technology. And for details about that, I encourage everyone to read my Atom publication to understand exactly how that works. But this was a basic tutorial about velocity of money and where to check velocity of money. And I will have a link to this Federal Reserve website in the description box below. And you can check it as often as you want if you're worried about inflation and velocity of money triggering inflation. If you found this video informative, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel because we cover many topics like this in a great deal of detail. Thank you very much for watching.